From this vantage point, the Earth's vital networks are visible, centered on the escalating tensions across the Middle East.
Welcome to our channel. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Today, we are excited to have Mr. Rathor joining us once again for another engaging debate. Today, the global power balance has completely shifted. But was this economic transformation of South Asia actually sudden, or was it just a matter of time?
Thank you, Hafsa, for the warm introduction. I also want to extend my gratitude to all our viewers and subscribers for joining us today. Your support means the world to us. That is the exact question geopolitical historians and economists are grappling with. For decades, Pakistan was viewed through a narrow lens in Western capitals, primarily as a frontline security state navigating chronic financial instability. Yet, the conventional military conflict between the United States and Iran fundamentally altered the trade architecture of Eurasia. When a massive, established maritime trade route is choked, economic gravity naturally finds the path of least resistance. Pakistan's case was exactly that. Its strategic geography allowed it to move past its historical economic stagnation and emerge almost overnight as a pivotal macroeconomic and transit hub.
What was the situation like before the conflict? What kind of pressure was Pakistan facing?
The situation was incredibly delicate. For years, the relationship between Washington and Tehran was defined by a volatile cycle of economic sanctions, proxy wars, and diplomatic failures. Iran had already begun integrating its economy deeply with Eastern powers like China and Russia, while Pakistan was caught right in the middle. Pakistan was dealing with its own severe domestic energy crisis and looked at Iran's massive gas reserves with immense interest. However, the pressure was immense. Washington repeatedly warned Islamabad that progressing with the Iran-Pakistan gas pipeline would trigger devastating secondary sanctions. Islamabad was walking a diplomatic tightrope, balanced between the vital financial aid of the U.S. and its Gulf allies on one side, and its desperate need for regional energy security on the other.
And when the war actually erupted, what was the turning point?
The turning point came when kinetic warfare entered the Persian Gulf, specifically targeting the Strait of Hormuz, the choke point through which roughly 20% of the world's petroleum passes. Commercial shipping insurance rates skyrocketed to prohibitive levels, forcing international shipping lines to bypass the Gulf entirely. Iranian ports were heavily disrupted or blockaded. This sudden shift completely cut off the landlocked Central Asian republics, like Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan, who relied on those routes. China and Russia faced an immediate strategic emergency. They needed an alternative maritime outlet that sat entirely outside the volatile Persian Gulf bubble. That alternative was already sitting right there, Pakistan's deep-sea port of Gwadar.
How did Gwadar handle this sudden crisis? What was the timeline?
It happened in rapid, highly compressed phases. Immediately following the ceasefire, Beijing rapidly accelerated its capital deployment into Pakistan, having realized just how vulnerable its traditional sea lines of communication were during the hostilities. The initial phase saw an emergency expansion of Gwadar's cargo handling and container capacity. Western shipping consortia, desperate for stable offloading points outside the immediate conflict zone, began routing commercial vessels directly to Karachi and Gwadar. Within the next 12 months, the overland rail and road networks connecting Gwadar to Kashgar and Xinjiang were upgraded to high-speed freight standards. Trans-Afghan pipelines and rail projects that had been stalled for decades received immediate international financial backing because Central Asia's vast resources now had only one viable direction to flow.
How did the U.S. and Western powers react to this sudden rise?
Washington viewed it as a major strategic setback. Declassified policy memos from that period reveal that the Pentagon feared the creation of an unassailable Eurasian fortress, a trade network operating entirely via land and non-Western waters, where Western economic sanctions would lose all coercive power. However, their hands were tied. They could not afford to completely destabilize a nuclear-armed Pakistan. Consequently, their official stance shifted to cautious engagement. They attempted to offer alternative infrastructure financing through Western-led initiatives while explicitly warning Islamabad against allowing foreign naval bases to be established along its coastline.
And what was the response from the China-Russia bloc?
For them, it was the ultimate validation of their long-term continental strategies. Beijing framed the rapid development of the Pakistani transit corridor as a triumph of peaceful economic integration over Western military interventionism. For Russia, which was facing heavy containment in European waters, securing a stable, friendly transit route to the warm waters of the global south was an absolute economic lifeline. Moscow frequently described the corridor in academic and state media as the democratization of global trade lanes, effectively breaking the monopoly of Western maritime dominance.
What was the domestic impact inside Pakistan on a local level?
Domestically, public and political opinion was deeply split. Officially, the government in Islamabad celebrated this era as the dawn of the Eurasian century. The massive influx of transit fees and foreign direct investment stabilized foreign exchange reserves and effectively broke Pakistan's historic dependence on the cycle of IMF bailouts. The industrial sectors in Punjab and Sindh experienced an unprecedented manufacturing boom. However, in regions like Balochistan and parts of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, there was notable local resistance. Local communities argued that while their land was being heavily utilized for multi-billion-dollar transit corridors, the wealth was being centralized in Islamabad or flowing out to foreign investors, sparking intense new debates over provincial autonomy and resource distribution.
What about the allegations of Pakistan acting as a double agent or falling into a debt trap? What is the actual truth there?
Declassified bilateral agreements and independent international financial audits have completely debunked those extreme propaganda claims. The widespread myth that Pakistan had quietly ceded sovereign control of Gwadar port and its nuclear assets to Beijing in exchange for debt relief was proven entirely false. Administrative, legal, and military control remained strictly under the authority of the Pakistani state. On the other hand, regional adversaries propagated claims that Pakistan was covertly providing airspace and logistical support to American bombers, while leaking intelligence to Tehran. The archival evidence now shows that Pakistan maintained an exceptionally strict policy of armed neutrality. Islamabad explicitly rejected Washington's requests for offensive airspace usage, learning from the heavy internal stability costs it paid in the post-9/11 era, and heavily secured its western borders to prevent any cross-border spillover of the conflict.
What does the hard economic evidence show? What do the numbers tell us?
The numbers demonstrate that this was not a temporary macroeconomic bump, but a permanent structural transformation. In the years following the conflict, Pakistan's transit trade revenue grew by over 400%. Container traffic at Gwadar and Karachi ports quickly surpassed that of several traditional Middle Eastern maritime hubs. Most importantly, the dramatic stabilization of the treasury allowed Pakistan to sign long-term currency swap agreements with major Asian central banks. This effectively allowed the country to de-dollarize a massive portion of its regional trade. Pakistan transitioned completely from an unsustainably import-driven, debt-reliant model into a robust, transit-earning economy.
How did this economic windfall impact Pakistan's military and political standing?
Politically, Pakistan transitioned from a nation frequently dictated to by external donors into a major regional decision-maker within platforms like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, simply because it held the physical keys to Eurasian trade. Militarily, this economic boom allowed for a comprehensive modernization of the armed forces. The Pakistan Navy's operational doctrine changed completely. It transformed from a purely defensive coastal force into a formidable blue water navy in the northern Arabian Sea, acting as the primary guardian of the new international shipping lanes, stretching from the Gulf of Oman into the wider Indian Ocean.
How did this change the country's internal society and cultural identity?
It triggered a profound psychological shift. For decades, the The dominant internal narrative inside Pakistan was one of continuous crisis management. Post-war, this shifted to a mindset of regional leadership and economic connectivity. The international community stopped viewing Pakistan through the restrictive lens of geosecurity and began seeing it through the lens of geoeconomics. Gwadar, once an isolated fishing village, grew into a cosmopolitan, multicultural port city where Mandarin, Russian, Uzbek, and English could easily be heard in the same commercial hubs. International business conferences and tourism completely rebranded the country's global image.
After looking at this entire historical chapter, what is the definitive lesson we should carry forward?
The ultimate lesson is that geography represents latent power waiting for a specific catalyst. For nearly 70 years, Pakistan's geographic location was described as a geopolitical curse due to its volatile neighborhood. Yet, when the established global order faced a systemic shock through the Iran-America war, that exact same geography became the country's greatest asset. Global power dynamics are never static. The infrastructure a nation builds during times of peace, even if heavily criticized or underutilized at the time, becomes the economic life raft for the world when the traditional global transit systems collapse. Pakistan's rise was not a historical accident. It was global trade naturally rerouting itself toward the path of survival.
Thank you for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. We'll be back soon with more great content.